Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Can you wave? Good to have you. Welcome to this session. So from Uganda to New York. At the beginning of this week, I was in Uganda. We're in Uganda, listening. So last week, it's not actually the beginning of this week, it's last week. Last week I was in Uganda at the Rhino Refugee Camp in northern Uganda, close to the border of South Sudan and DRC Congo. And there, we launched a new call to action for 3 transformations for a whole child support in education in emergencies, co-created with youth and activists, young refugees, youth-led organizations, and students' unions for a whole child support for children and young people during and in emergencies, with a priority on defending their right to education. The call to action, so far, it has been endorsed by almost 100 organizations, with a majority youth and student-led organizations, alongside key global education stakeholders, such as, there are so many, Education International, World Vision, GCE, ActionAid. And I know you're wondering, why Uganda? Why didn't we wait to come to the UNGA and launch it here? So this is why. Show me a better place than alongside the children and young people whose rights this call to action aims to uphold. Also, it is a direct challenge to the global north, US's centrism to such global launches, especially during the UNGA month. So there, we heard from the children through their children parliament. The refugee children have a children parliament, very vibrant young girls and boys. And we heard their stories. They raised pertinent issues. They talked about mental health, from the trauma, from the physical harm they went through as they were fleeing war to go to Uganda. They spoke about the digital divide, especially during the pandemic, when all our governments said that education was going to be on radio, on TV, and the frequencies can't get to the refugee camps. So we are leaving those children behind. They spoke about financing. I'm very passionate about financing in education that further marginalizes them from education. We are here now during TESS, the Transforming Education Summit, and the UNGA. I'm bringing their voices with me. And together here with my amazing panelists, we are going to continue to amplify these voices. So on to our amazing panelists for this session. Hello? Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce them from the farthest end. I have with me Nataly Rivas, who is the representative of Jesuit Refugee Service. And then we're here with Esther Ngemba, who is Nataly Rivas is the representative of the Youth for Education in Emergencies for Plan International and Education Cannot Wait. And then I'm here with Esther. Esther Ngemba is the representative of Jesuit Refugee Service. So we are going to get into this panel. Esther, I know you've been preparing. We have been. So can you share with us today on this panel? Young people, you and I, and Nataly, we are on the forefront. We are often on the front line of emergencies. Why do you think this is the greatest challenge?
Yeah, Winnie, as a person who lived in Uganda as a refugee from the DRC, I think I was placed in a unique position to share about the challenges young people face, especially refugee youth. as an education. When my family was forced to flee to Uganda, we faced so many challenges just getting access to a simple education. But my parents worked so hard to ensure that me and my 4 siblings have access to education and we have the challenge to go to school. Because one thing that my parents always said, education is a key to a bright future. And I always knew, even though I had to flee my home country, Congo, the one thing that was not taken away from me was my knowledge and power to learn. No matter where I went, I always had that power. And as I faced so many challenges, just getting access to education, and while I was in the education system as a refugee, but one of the bigger challenges that someone faced was my brother. My brother has a vision disability, so he's not able to learn like normal kids. So while we're in Uganda, the education system for refugees is like everybody, you have to learn the same way. And he was so behind because of his vision, and the gap was so behind. And that's why I think we have to ensure that even people with disability have access to education. So when we say access to education for refugee, we're also saying access to education for those who have a disability also. But then also I think it's also important to ensure that mental health access for refugees is also being in process while they are receiving education. So now, as a young person here in the United States, I'm a student, I'm an advocate, and an entrepreneur. That's why I always share my story and my experience and bring these stories to lawmakers. I'm honored to work with JRS, where I lobby on Capitol Hills to go speak to like our senators here and telling them why they should increase the number of refugees being welcomed to the United States, why they should increase the fundings being towards education. And the reason for this is because I know every single refugee or a child around the world, they must have lost their home, everything, but one thing that they do have is their power, and their power, which is their knowledge, and they continue to have hunger for knowledge, and that's something that we can keep that's stable for them. And as a young person, our future for today, like one thing that we say, today we're preparing and we're educating ourselves so we can create a bright future for tomorrow.
Thank you. That's amazing. And I know probably maybe you're wondering why we don't have gender balance here. I'm so sorry. Apologies from one of our panelists, Nhial Deng, who's the youth representative on the Refugee Education Council, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. So Nataly, I'll pose the next question to you. So we know that transforming education in emergencies will require action at all levels, all stakeholders involved. What has been the most effective solutions that you have seen that could help this transformation?
Hello? Okay, it's okay. Well, this is a big challenge for me because this is my first time to speak in English in this event, and sorry if you can understand. And what? I continue. If we want a truly sustainable and equal future for all, gender transformative education must be a priority worldwide. I am Nataly, and I'm from Ecuador, South America. I am part of the Global Youth Panel for Education in Emergencies, and also the Because I Am a Girl movement. Gender-based violence against girls and young people in countries such as Ecuador affects their education, especially where there is crisis, because they face big barriers. In the case of students from vulnerable homes, communities affected by crisis, and children with little parental supervision, they are more likely to experience sexual violence and unwanted pregnancies, causing a school dropout. During the pandemic in Ecuador, between 2020 and 2021, more than 3,000 pregnant girls and young women were treated at hospitals, many of them affected by sexual violence, and there are no records of how many of them continued with their studies. We know that girls have the same right to education as boys, but in practice, especially in crisis situations, girls are the first to drop out for the educational systems because they face barriers caused by their gender role, ethnicity, economic status, age, and other social identities that combined prevent them from enjoying their right to education. Therefore, the world must note that violence is also an emergency, and that in crisis situations, it is one of the main causes that prevent girls and young women from accessing or continuing their education.
Esther, probably we can also hear from you. What are the solutions you've seen work?
Yeah, some of the solutions that I've really seen work is providing young people access to mental health and psychological services, and I think that's like key resources. If we're talking about education, but if your mental health is not okay, then you cannot have the right to really learn properly. I know for me personally, due to the work experience, I have faced so many mental health challenges, and until I was able to go therapy, I realized how that transformed me. Even in my education here in the United States, you know how that's transformed me. So I think it's credible and it's very needed that as we're giving access to refugee children, we also implement those mental health programs in there.
Thank you so much. A very pertinent issue, and I have shared. When we were in Uganda, it kept on coming up, and you could see from the young children, and they spoke about trauma, about what they have been through, and I agree. That's a solution that should be work, access to mental health. Thank you. So, Nataly, back to you again. The theme of our panel today is intergenerational solidarity, coordination, and action. As youth activists for education in emergencies, what are the key actions you'd like to see by governments, civil society, other youth organizations, and activists?
Well, as young activists for children and youth rights in the Global Youth Panel and also in the movement in my country, we consider that key action is working to respond to gender-based violence, to achieve gender equality in and through education. In Ecuador, we do this through the strengthening of leadership and empowerment of young women and girls so that they can make an influence in all space where important decisions about their lives are made, from families and communities to educational institutions and national and international instances. The world needs to question gender stereotypes and change harmful social norms in order to build societies where families and teachers support girls to go to school. Educational institutions must have teachers trained for a gender transformative education to create environments where girls feel safe. Governments must recognize the importance of investing in education as a fundamental tool to get countries out of crisis. Educated girls not only allows them to improve their own lives, but it also changes the world. We are convinced that societies and educational systems can be reimagined from young people's minds. As long as transformative, qualitative, inclusive, and gender-focused education is not guaranteed, education will continue in a state of emergencies.
Thank you. Esther.
So some of the key for stakeholders, one thing that I would like to say, which I think is not realistic, is like world peace. The reason why we have education in emergency right now is because people are fleeing war. An end to war and calling a peace treaty, that would be like one, but we also want to have SMART goals. The first thing that I would say, access to education for people in emergency, but increasing the funds. Education is the kind of the lowest one that's really funded, and ensuring that every refugee child, every girl, even everyone with a disability has access to education. No matter what gender or what gender you identify with, you also have access to education. But then the other thing is mental health access, ensuring that we are increasing funds and we are calling stakeholders, organizations to really pledge towards supporting mental health. And then the other thing that we need to do is close the gap that we have right now. We have a learning gap. As in the United States, one thing that I also realized, even here in the United States, but it's even worse abroad, refugee kids are behind. They are behind on their education. So we really need to close that gap where we're providing resources to them or things that they need. And then one thing, providing scholarships for immigrants and refugees. And I think even here in the United States, we don't have enough scholarships for refugees and immigrants, even asylum seekers. Like in my hometown, Cleveland, we have Say Yes scholarship. If you go to public school, everybody can get it. But if you're a refugee or an asylum seeker, it's kind of hard for you to get it. So we have to ensure we're including refugees and immigrants into this action when we create scholarships or anything to move forward so we can give them a brighter future.
Absolutely. So I want to turn to the panel, to the audience, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. What are the solutions? What are your recommendations? Have you worked in education in emergency? What hasn't? My panelists said. So I want to come to you and also get to listen from you.
Thank you. I'm probably too old to really join the panel. I just wanted to say so many things that you have said make so much sense to me. I work for a charity called War Child that delivers education in conflict-affected countries. Refugee children are behind on their learning, and it's because so many of them don't have access to even the most basic forms of education. And honestly, the problem isn't that there aren't lots of teachers in refugee camps. It's not that there aren't lots of teachers in displaced camps. It's that there just isn't enough funding. The humanitarian system spends about $32 billion a year on providing emergency aid, but less than 3% of that goes on education, which is completely crazy, given that half of all displaced populations are under the age of 18. That's the fact that we've known for a long time, a really long time, and that number has not shifted significantly. I think decision makers in the government ministries that hand out aid and make those decisions really need to understand that it's crucial. And one way to make them understand is for people like you to get in front of people like them and make the case. If I make the case all the time, but I'm just an NGO guy, like, obviously. But, you know, the real people who are really affected are the best advocates for that change. So I really appreciate what you're doing today.
We'll take two more.
I have two comments. First of all, I would like to also highlight what you said about mental health issues, that is very important to address not only for students, but also for teachers, in particular in conflict settings. And second, the issue of how people who have been flying war and conflict and human rights abuses in different parts of the world receive very different treatment. We are very aware, for example, of what is happening in Europe about the Ukrainians, and there has been funding from many places to really address the issue. But I was wondering what happened in emergencies, long-time emergencies in Somalia and Eritrea, and in many other places in Africa, such as Yemen, where people are just dying, not for 10 years, for 20 or for 30 years. They have been not receiving funding for training teachers, for mental health issues, and for early child care education. So in a war, we always talk about equality, non-discrimination. We really want to support all the people, the innocent people flying from Ukraine. I completely show my solidarity with them, but we also want to have more solidarity for people of blood color just fleeing conflict in many places who not receive attention. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. I am Whitney from Cameroon. I'll be speaking from experience from my country. So I am a child protection officer for a community-based organization back home, and I have been opportunity to work with refugees and displaced children. So you spoke about scholarships. most often, I'm speaking on the perspective from Cameroon, if refugees wait on scholarship, most often it's not being granted to them on an easy base. So I'll propose education for refugees is being brought right up to their doorsteps, like free education for children from the tertiary to the secondary level. So it is their way into education, gender inclusiveness, comprehensive sexual education. So the government and INGOs and NGOs can maybe offer free education for the children, so it helps in their growth process. Thank you.
Yes, one more. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm called Anyakot Daffin from Uganda. I would just want to ask a question about child labor. I wanted to ask, how can child labor be eliminated in the world? I'm hearing you talking about refugees. In my country, Uganda, there are gold mines. Children work in the mines each and every day, facing challenges. I would like to know, how best can it be eliminated so that those children get a chance of going back to school? As you're saying, you're giving opportunities, or you're going to put up a campaign to take these children back to school. I just want to know, what best can you do to eliminate child labor? Thank you for listening.
You want to take that?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Also in my home country, Congo, child labor is one of the major crises going on right now. I would say hold those companies accountable. The reason why we have so much child labor right now is because, like, I will speak from my personal experience in Congo, is because of Apple, Samsung, they are using mines, and we're now holding them accountable. I think it's holding those big corporations accountable what's happening. We do need to end child labor, what's happening, and I would say presenting your stories and telling people what's going on in these nations. But I will also, let's continue. Yeah, also, and that's something that I will encourage every single child who's bringing child labor to really speak about it. And I would say something, as African nations, we are suffering from child labor more than the Western Western countries, and this is because of colonization. And we need, and it's sometimes we need to decolonize Africa again and remove neocolonization from Africa again. And I think it would take youth like you and all of us to really stand up to even some of our world leaders and tell them, no more child labor, we're not working for you, and tell them no more child labor, because our governments are not really doing it for us, they're selling us out.
Thank you so much for that. And the truth is, even in countries where we have emergencies, we also have children in child labor. So we have children in emergencies, but also these same children are in child labor. They're in emergencies, they're forced to work, they're not in school. So thank you, Daphne, for that question. So as we wrap up, my panelists, I want to give you each 1 minute. To give us your closing remarks, with a brief summary highlighting actions moving forward. Where do we go from now?
Finally, I'm so grateful for that important opportunity because it allows me to reflect on new challenges, and you're really inspiring me with your jobs, with your fight. I think it is essential for Ecuadorian girls to tell the world what happens with their lives, what happened with their education. And I hope in the future many girls have the same opportunity to raise their voice and change the world, and with the support of social actors. And, well, viva la juventud!
Esther, what's the way forward?
I think the way forward is for us to keep fighting. as young people to never give up. I know sometimes it's challenging. We have to keep fighting for the things that we know, especially for us who have gone through experience of war, being a refugee, child labor. It's important that we keep telling our stories and we create campaigns that are fundamental for our community, and to not let anyone give up. And we are the future, and today we're working so hard so we can have a brighter future, and nobody can ever take that power away from you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for making time for this panel. That will be the end of our panel today. I have been your moderator, Winnie Nyandiga, a representative of the Global Students Forum and the 100 Million Campaign. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.